All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all again for joining today's discussion from entry level to the C-suite. And we're speaking from the context of the workplace experience of Black professionals. My name is Ivan Hudson, and I'm serving as today's collaboration artist. I'm owner of the Ivan Hudson Agency. We are a multi-line insurance, business, and financial solutions firm headquartered in Little Rock, Arkansas. And I'm honored to host and moderate today's discussion. I would like to take the point of privilege and acknowledge the lives and legacies of two civil rights icons that we lost over the weekend, Reverend C.T. Vivian and Congressman John Lewis. Both of these gentlemen received the Medal of Freedom during their lifetimes. Please pause for a moment of silence for these global giants, for these American heroes. Thank you. Now, for those of you who are wondering, today's event is a first in a series of discussions that I'll be hosting, presenting related to the disproportionate impact that life's events, and specifically the disruptive events of 2020, have had on Blacks in America. I know that you could be doing anything with your time, and so we hope to give you value for the time that you've invested here today. And to that end, here are just a few housekeeping items for you to be mindful of. As I mentioned before, everyone should be muted as you join today's event, but sometimes technology is not on our side. And so if you happen to find your microphone unmuted, please make it your business to mute your microphone. Our intent is to make this a clean call, but if we have any delays or glitches, we just ask that you be gracious with us, and we thank you in advance for your patience. Each panelist is speaking on their own behalf. We don't even have time to touch the entire workplace experience of Black professionals, but I just think it's important to know that each panelist is speaking on their own behalf. They're not representing their company or organizations, they're representing themselves. Now, where you get to contribute is the chat section. We kind of went back and forth on whether or not to leave that open, but we'd love to hear from you as some of your comments as this discussion is taking place. Also, that'll be the primary source for which I will field questions for our Q&A section. So please feel free to post questions in the Q&A section. There may also be resources, links to articles, and other resources that are placed in the chat. For any post-event correspondence, email results@ivanhudsonagency.com. For any post-event correspondence, you can email me at results@ivanhudsonagency.com. So from here, after a brief introduction, each of our panelists will provide their own individual opening remarks. And then I'm going to bring them all together so we can have some group dialogue. Starting with the coronavirus pandemic, coupled with the government-imposed shutdown of the economy, literally disrupted the livelihood of citizens in virtually every city across this country. Businesses closed their doors, others sputtering on fumes just to remain open, unemployment through the roof. Workers who remain employed face uncertain forecasts for their short-term viability and their long-term stability, and families were, and still some, are at risk of losing their homes. I do believe it's important to note that at the end of March, Congress passed the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Securities Act, also known as the CARES Act, which was designed to aid individuals and small businesses. Now, whatever your sentiments are about the implementation and delivery of the CARES Act, that's a discussion for another time, but I'm here for it. Racial and civil unrest came to a head after the world witnessed the murder of George Floyd at the hands of law enforcement, and justice continues to be sought. At the peak of the economic crisis, 4.7 million mortgages were in forbearance, the largest portion of applicants, Black Americans. At the peak, over 40 million unemployment claims had been filed, which, by the way, benefits were scheduled to, or the additional benefits were scheduled to end in just a few days. Blacks disproportionately impacted. This does not factor in the individuals that were already out of the workforce, those that now have reduced hours, reduced benefits, and reduced income. I'm optimistic, but I understand that we are not out of the woods just yet. But I do believe it's safe to say that the world that we knew just a few short months ago no longer exists. And it is that narrative that we are contributing to today from a workplace perspective on how to build a bridge to the other side of 2020 and all that it has rendered. So our first panelist is Broderick Daniels. Broderick is the Human Resources Director from WEHCO Media. Broderick, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you've been navigating these past few months.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you, Ivan, for putting together this discussion. A lot of times in corporate America and a lot of our inclusive efforts and programs, we tend to go out of our way for other affinity groups, but the African Americans or Black folks, for lack of better words, we tend to be left out sometimes, and or a lot of times, and whether intentional or unintentional, it was still happening. So I'm really glad that there's something to give us a voice for this type of discussion. As far as me being involved in the human resources profession, it started when I went to school. I started out at U of A, transferred to ASU to try to save money. Got to ASU and the tuition went up the same as U of A when I got there. I was like, man, I could have stayed at Fayetteville.
Right.
But I had an HR class. Dr. Hoyt was the teacher, and he made the class so interactive. He made the class fun. And I just kept saying, once I graduate from school, if I ever get a chance to get into that profession, I'll definitely try my hand at it. I got a degree in general studies just to get out of school. Went to work at Foot Locker, and then was working all the time. Did that for almost 5 years. Then I heard about a position at the Democrat Gazette in HR. And so, oh man, this is my chance. So I interviewed for the job. The HR director at that time was Kay Brewer, a phenomenal person and who is now one of my mentors. She offered me the job, but she said, I don't know if you're gonna take it because this is not the money that you're used to. She offered me $9.75 an hour. And I was not used to that type of hourly wage in a while. And so I said, well, this is my way to get my foot in the door in the HR profession. Everything at that time was looking for somebody with at least 1 year to 2 years of experience, direct HR experience. And so I said, if I can promise you I'll stay in this role for 2 years, will you give me the job then? She said, I don't think you'll stay, but I'll give you a chance. And I've been with the company for 20 years now. So it's been great. So I moved from that HR clerk position at $9.75 an hour, where I had to move back in with my family just to make ends meet, to now being the corporate HR director at WEHCO Media, the parent company for the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. So it's been truly great, the journey. I got involved because of Kay and her mentorship. I got involved with the Central Arkansas Human Resources Association, then got transferred and promoted, moved to Fayetteville for the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette, got involved with NOARC, the Northwest Arkansas Human Resources Association. And when I got there, they were impressed with how involved I was. So Don Marr was the state director for the Arkansas Society for Human Resource Management at that time. And he said, Broderick, we have a role open. We want you to get involved on the state council. And so it's just been a never-ending journey ever since. Been learning and growing with some really good people. And so I tell everybody, if you have a dream, if you have a focus as to where you want to go in your profession, just do whatever you can to get there. No matter where you have to start and the sacrifices you have to make, it will be worth the while eventually.
All right. Thank you, Broderick. And just to kind of summarize a couple of those points, you were compelled to get into the industry because you saw a lack of diversity in human resources and in those director and higher positions. And also you see the value in networking. I always say that you're networking or you're not working, but you can't do both. And so we're going to talk a bit about that mentorship piece a little bit later. Thank you, Broderick. I'm thrilled to have Kristin Nichols as a panelist. Kristin specializes in the area of diversity, equity, and belonging. Kristin, tell us a little bit about your background and how you see us beginning to build a bridge to the other side of 2020.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you're located. And thank you again, Ivan, for just inviting me to be a part of this panel. And thank you, Broderick, just for sharing your perspectives. So like Ivan mentioned, I lead diversity, equity, and belonging and talent acquisition for Ultimate Software and Kronos Incorporated. And, you know, I've been with the company since January of 2020, but prior to then, I served in the healthcare industry, banking industry, and worked in higher education. Currently, right now, I created and co-chair our BUILD, which is Black Upcoming Individuals and Leadership and Development Community of Interest, or as some companies refer to them as ERGs or BRGs, also an at-large member of our Equity at Work Council. And, you know, really my transition and story into HR is a long and lengthy one, so I'll spare you all the details, but you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn and I'll be glad to share. And, you know, while we're thinking about diversity and the Black Lives Matter movement and kind of COVID-19, it's really just highlighted the long existing inequities in our systems and the shifting of our cultures in the workplace. And that's a big piece of really what I want to touch on today. And so while diversity and implicit bias have become these buzzwords that I think there's still more that we can learn here, right? So diversity is no longer just that feel-good thing. It's more about what's business imperative. And, you know, as we think about companies wanting to remain competitive over the next 30 to 50 years, if their workforce is not mirroring what their the communities and their customers look like, that's going to be hard for them to, you know, remain and have that competitive advantage. And just for context, when we talk about diversity, that is basically meaning differences, right? So the big focus is on differences that we talk about in the workplace are gender, race, sexual orientation, disability status, military status, but there are so many other different components of what diversity means, like education, parental status, income level, right? Diversity of thought. That's a big one that everyone is talking about, but it also falls into the 3 dimensions of diversity, looking at things from an organizational level, right? By function, by leadership role, who's in the C-suite, right? Who's at the individual contributor level, looking at those particular things and talking about the internal dimensions like our age and our gender, external dimensions of diversity. That's going to be, you know, again, our personal habits. Do we like to go golfing? Do we like to watch basketball? Things of those of that sort. But basically, you know, our demographics is shifting. And I don't know if anyone here follows the data, but if you're following the US Census data, by 2055, this country will not have or be a single ethnic or racial majority. And I think that that's the piece that we have to remember and to kind of keep in mind over the next couple of decades. And so diversity is a competitive advantage in today's marketplace. And so companies whose workforces mirror those demographics that make up the communities in which they serve, they're going to better understand and be able to better retain their customers and increase company attraction to hire more diverse talent and retain more talent, and specifically more Black and brown talent. So a quick bit here, but a lot of companies have been like posting pictures of blackout for Black Lives Matter, or even just posting pictures and changing their company logos around Pride Month last month. And that's great, but I think it's fair to say that talent is now looking forward to more meaty, right? More meaty things like policy and stepping away from the performative allyship piece there. Benefits of having that diverse workplace, super important. And I think it's worth highlighting that. So you have better financial returns. You're able to capture new markets. you have improved teamwork, creativity, and problem solving. You can capture a larger piece and a higher market share. And then of course, innovation and improved retention. And I'm not certain if anyone here follows McKinsey and Company and those reports that come out, but I'll be glad to drop a link into the chat afterwards. But they just released in May of 2020, their third report around the business case for diversity and especially in leadership. And it continues to prove and support that there is companies that are more diverse, especially in the C-suite, outperform financially those companies that are not. And that's a study I've been following since 2014. So if you get a chance afterwards, check that out. But as we talk about the business case for diversity and transforming our workplace cultures, we really have to take a look at the systems that we've also established as organizations, right? So we're talking about bias that still exists in the workplace because the people behind the processes and the decisions that are being made are biased. And even the most well-intentioned people still have biases. We all have bias. Let's just put that out there. We all have bias, good or bad, however you want to perceive that. And the sooner that we realize that, the more fragile we can stop being fragile and start doing the work. So if we take a look at our hiring processes and our candidate experience from a talent acquisition perspective, let's look at the talent advisory discussion. Do the job descriptions have inclusive language? Is the amount of experience that's being asked for really required? Is that creating a barrier for people of color who historically have been less advantaged? When we talk about artificial intelligence or AI, that's becoming very common, especially in the tech industry. Are the assessments that are provided to candidates, are they having a disparate impact on the members of those underrepresented groups? Is the creator of the AI trained in mitigating that bias? For hiring managers or people who are, if you're interviewing someone or you're part of an interview panel or even a recruiter, right? So looking at the resume. Resumes provide hiring partners with candidate information pertaining to skills, experiences, abilities, but they also contain key details about candidates that can be used to eliminate or advance them in the hiring process: name, education, address. I know most of you are in Little Rock, Arkansas. I'm in Sunrise, Florida, but I can tell you where someone lives and what part of town they're in based upon their zip code. Looking at the different organizations and associations that they're a part of, dates, trying to guess someone's age. So ageism is alive and well in the workplace. Thinking about special interests or hobbies, is this person like me? Also language barriers, right? So is it hard to understand someone who may have an accent or who may be international? Thinking about tone. Is there a certain tone that you're looking for, a certain type of enunciation? So just kind of keeping those things in mind as we talk about the hiring process, even talking about the offer stage. There are a lot of things that kind of point back to the fact that women and people of color, Black and brown people, do not negotiate their pay. So, are we being consistent in the way that we're working with compensation teams and using best practices? And another big piece is that, more than a third of US workers usually land their job by employee referrals. So if you just think about this, if a company is already homogenous and we keep hiring people that we refer that look like us, what progress are you really expecting to make as it relates to increasing diversity in your workplace? And that's just from the external hiring point. If you look internally, what are the hiring processes like? What is the promotion process like? Are there career paths embedded in certain roles that have leadership positions? So unpacking all of that, and I won't talk you to death here. I'll leave some time for the next panelist, but I will say this. If you don't walk away with anything else that I've said, ban the term culture fit, right? So fit means that I have to be like you, or that I have to change who I am to be comfortable to survive in this particular workplace. If someone has to fit in, they don't belong there. And instead, let's start thinking about things or someone as being a culture add. Let's start talking about values fit. And I think that those things are some big takeaways that we can start talking about. So again, think about, bias in the workplace and think about the business case for diversity. look internally at your organizations and say, am I where I need to be to remain relevant in the next 30 years? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kristin. And we're going to definitely give you time to expound on some more of your comments. Kristin mentioned the business case as part of her comments, the changing demographics, which actually census data has showed us for decades now. And I'm glad to see that companies are beginning to take note of that and pay attention. And with that, I mean, if you haven't completed your census, there's still time, but please, ma'am, please, sir, be counted, okay? Next up, I'm pleased to present our next panelist, Jason Thurman. Jason is the Vice President of People for Elegance Living. He is the one panelist representing the healthcare sector. Jason, the floor is yours.
Hey, good afternoon, Ivan, and thank you so much for having this and the opportunity to be a panelist today. It was great listening to Broderick and Kristin on their experience, and as I speak through my experience, I started out in healthcare when I was 15. So when it's from entry level to C-suite, I know what it's like to be in the trenches and to be that frontline worker as I worked my way through my undergrad as a caregiver and assisted living home, and got my undergrad and then my master's in human resources. So I've been in human resources for about 15 years, providing different structure, and I really thrive on the change aspect of, the culture transformation of how we can interject ourselves to make the organizations best thrive in what we do. So I consider myself more so a vital role in the organization and the restructuring of the actual company. But when you look at that, one of the most vital resources when it comes to organizations and them actually getting ahead is the people. That's the most vital resource, is the people who's running your multi-million-dollar business. And I always tell people it's where the rubber meets the road. These are the people who are in the trenches doing the footwork and the legwork to make your organization profitable. And sometimes we fail to realize, because most people that are in those C-suite positions have not been, the boots on the ground and dealing, especially in healthcare. So it's good to have that aspect and that perspective where I'm able to see from both positions. And, coming down from what Kristin mentioned earlier about those buzzwords, a lot of times organizations use diversity as a buzzword, or use it loosely. And most often than not, that is not truly defined as, who you are and what your culture is. And that's where I believe that people who are people of color sometimes get kind of the short end of the stick, and as Broderick mentioned earlier, is that, when we are as an organization, we see sometimes that we as African Americans get left out of the conversations. And I think that sometimes we definitely need to bring that to the forefront of who we represent and who we are, because eventually, we're in 2020, COVID-19 will be gone eventually, and it's going to be business back to normal. What is your business going to look like after this pandemic? Or, if we're on the brink of a recession, how are you going to overcome that and get to that next, mountain of where you want to be as an organization? And I truly believe that sometimes organizations fail people of color because, they actually truly have lukewarm or ineffective or pretty much simply non-existent policies around diversity and inclusion. And, how do we assist or help, people of color get to that next level? I know it's been my personal experience that most people that are in the higher level, senior management, senior level positions are not people of color. And sometimes they're the representation of the organization. So how can you reach the people when you have 95% of your workforce who does not physically look like you? And sometimes it's hard to reach those employees simply because you can't put yourself on their level or understand, where they're coming from and those type of things. So I truly believe that some of the key workplace diversity principles that we have to understand is that we have to treat people with respect and dignity always. We have to value the differences. We're all different as who we are. and diversity of our employees and their backgrounds and understanding their culture. And just because they don't look like us, or just because they wasn't raised on the same side of the tracks as us, you know, we're still people. You know, eliminating the unfair and inappropriate barriers, that's definitely within the workplace of how we're going to actually help them, and not with the judgment, but based on equity and merit, honestly. And some employers, you know, we have to look into our true structure and our mission. And a lot of companies have missions and mission statements, but are those just words on a piece of paper? We have to ensure that we're not only going to employ or must receive a true depiction of our society in which we actually exist and how we operate and do business. And that's how we're going to get past 2020. That's how we're going to make our businesses thrive going forward. And just to be honest, I do truly believe that changes are happening. I don't believe they're happening quickly. They're happening slowly as organizations are starting to really see and grapple with the need of how to have people of color as a representation of their C-suite positions. Because let's be honest, you know, discrimination and harassment is inevitable in the workplace. It's going to arise. You know, how are you going to deal with it? And if you don't have somebody that understands both sides of the coin, then that makes it a little bit difficult.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Jason. For sure, I like how you pointed out the profile of the kind of the internal leadership versus that customer facing, or those frontline employees, and even to piggyback off of your comments and Kristin's comments. I think for our audience's information, it's important to point out that Black Americans' aggregate purchasing power in America is over $1.3 trillion. And so although our focus today is on the workspace, smart companies are the ones that will build connection internally with their workforce, as well as in a consumer-facing manner. And so consumers know that they're heard, so consumers know that they're felt, so that Black workers and Black consumers know that their contributions and their buying power matters. Thank you, Jason. And our fourth panelist is Dr. Claretha Hughes. Dr. Hughes has vast experience from corporate to higher education to entrepreneurship. And looking forward to hearing her comments today. Dr. Hughes.
Hello, Ivan. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Ivan, for inviting me and coercing me into participating. I'm looking forward to this discussion. My background is a little different than the others. My background, I'm a chemist. My undergrad was chemistry, and I was working on a master's in textile chemistry when my doctor told me find another career, because I was working in the textile industry, and I started out as a management trainee on the management track, and I was allergic to just about everything in their facilities. So I transitioned from that Master of Textiles degree to a Master of Textile Technology Development. And I had to do some soul searching in '96 and say, what am I going to do with a chemistry degree, a Master of Textiles, and I can't work as a chemist? So what I did was I looked at every job I'd had, from working at a Chamber of Commerce during high school, all in the library at Clemson, working in the computer aided instruction lab at Clemson, different things. And I said, you know what? I can help people transition, make career transitions. I can do technical training. I can train chemistry because I know it. I can train textiles because I know it. So I worked for Abbott Labs in the healthcare and helped them transition from an R&D line to a production line. And so after that, I said, if I'm going to do the training, I need to have the doctorate in it. I want to teach it. So I went to work for Coca-Cola Bottling Company Consolidated as an internal training consultant for their manufacturing lines and part of their sales, service, and marketing group. And while I was there, I did my doctorate at Virginia Tech, because Virginia Tech was the only place in the state of Virginia that I could get the specialization in training and development. And so I did career and technical ed, specializing in training and development. And my dissertation, I looked at faculty development. They were transitioning to introducing computer technology into instruction. And this was way back in 1998. So Virginia Tech at that time, the entire city of Blacksburg was wireless, and it still is today. It's the most wired wireless community in the US. And so working at Virginia Tech, I evaluated their faculty development institute, how do they integrate technology. And I was still working at Coke, and a friend of mine was like, have you thought about teaching online? And I was like, well, no, but I'll think about it. And so what I did was I started teaching for Baker College online. And you had to go 6 weeks of training before they would ever let you teach a course. And I developed the entire skill-based pay system inside Coca-Cola for all of our employees, and all of that I computerized. So that was between 1998 and 2004. So I've been teaching totally online since 2002, and since 2004 here at the University of Arkansas, Fayetteville. So when this disruption came along, my life did not change because I teach totally online. It was nothing I needed to do differently to meet the needs of the disruption in the workplace. And I've edited a book. I've submitted an entire journal proposal. I've written several articles all during this pandemic because I'd say I was prepared for change. And the reason I say that is, you know, coming into academia, you have to you hear the publish or perish. You got to do the tenure track. And so for us, the C-suite is when you make it to where I am, full professor. And the only other place you can go is you could do service at the university and become a university professor, or you can extend your research further and become a distinguished professor. So from that perspective, the work entails a lot of research, interacting with the community, you do service, you do teaching, and all of those things combined has led me to my research agenda, which started way back at Burlington on valuing people and technology in the workplace. And what I looked at, we spent $30 million over, I say, a 2-year period upgrading the technology in our workplace at the time. But we had people in there that could not read or write. Literally, they were marking an X for their paycheck in 1991. So I started looking at the concept of how do we truly value the people the same way we value technology in our workplace. And that's relevant today because now we're in the 4th industrial revolution. How with artificial intelligence, machine learning, most of the jobs, and this COVID-19 has accelerated the 4th industrial revolution quicker than we think, because now that everybody's at home, all of us on Zoom, we have no excuse but to learn how to use technology. And technology will displace a lot of the things that we were doing before this COVID-19. So when you go back, you may never make it back. There are a lot of companies that have chosen not to bring their workers back into the workplace. They're going to leave them at home and let them do it however they choose. For me, I'm just happy as a kid in a candy shop. Nothing changed. But from a diversity perspective, what I've done is I've created a concept of diversity intelligence. And I developed that concept not because I consider myself a diversity scholar, but because when I looked at valuing people in technology, I came up with 5 common values for people in technology. I said, how can you truly value a person that you can't see? How do you value a person that you've marginalized? And so I define diversity in the context of the federal laws. And so I've developed a diversity intelligence scale where I'm measuring their diversity knowledge, their training and education, and their behavior towards protected class groups. So it's a leadership development scale. And I've got a company out of the UK, I can't disclose right now, that's currently testing the scoring aspect of it. And so I ended up having to develop a company. And I developed a company in the last 3 weeks, and it's still being expanded because the university has copyrighted the scale and they're licensing the scale and they're trademarking in turn. So I've developed the company to capture this scale and all of the interest that we've already had from the market in organizations who want leaders who are diversity intelligent. And then the company in the UK, they already have it as a part of their HR structure and leadership structure that diversity is one component of their performance review. To be a leader in that organization, you must show your diversity, what you're doing towards diversity. So they're way out front of a lot of organizations. And so right now I'm working with about 25 of their executive leadership team, and we're fine tuning the scoring of this instrument. So that's where I am. And if you want to get to the next level, you don't just talk about diversity, you show and apply diversity. And so the tool that I've developed is one tool to take your organization to the next level and take you, because you can get an individual score on it.
You know, I think the term diversity, even as we've shared on this panel, you know, is so vast, and we can't begin to touch the entire definition. And much like the experience of Black professionals in the workplace, it's a vast and wide and deep experience. And so we're just touching just a little bit of that today. But I have one follow-up question. So to your point, there are a lot of professionals that are reluctant to adopt this new virtual reality, this digitization that we're in. I don't know if it's because they feel like it's, you know, thrown in their face. I can kind of empathize with that, or if it's just that they're trying to hold on to something in the past. What do you say to folks that are reluctant to adopt this new industrial revolution, this next iteration?
Well, I just had a book released on the strategies for attracting, maintaining, and balancing a mature workforce. And it's an edited book. And what we found is that one of my authors talked about how the younger generation has come in and they are so much more tech savvy than some of the older generation. So she even talked about a reverse mentoring, where the younger generation actually mentor the older generation on how to use technology, and the older generation mentor the younger ones on how to, progress through the workplace, and they sponsor them and they develop them from a maturity perspective, but they've got to be teachable. If you're not teachable and you're not willing to learn, it's a wasted effort on both sides. And then I did another book that came out last year on how to manage technology for middle skilled and low skilled workers with 3 other colleagues. And we looked at how, for economic regeneration, how you truly have to, there's no way around the technology. And one of my colleagues, Lionel Robert at the University of Michigan, he specializes on virtual teams. And so if you cannot engage everybody and talk about the experiences that each individual worker is having, which is what my research on the 5 values look at. I look at location value, use value, maintenance value, modification, and time value. For example, the quickest example I can give you, if you buy a computer, you know where you're going to put it, you know how you're going to use it, you know how you're going to maintain it, you pretty much know how you're going to modify it if you need to, and you pretty much know how long you're going to keep it. But you're a hired person, you don't really know where you're going to put them on the job. Their resume may match your job description, but you don't know what else they brought with them. Your maintenance, how are you going to develop them to use the technology inside your organization? If they go out and get additional education on their own and modify themselves, how do you really fit them into the organization? And then with time value, every employee is an employee at will in America, so they can leave and go whenever they want. And then you got to deal with the retirement piece. So when I looked at that and came to the point of diversity intelligence, I had already developed a term called workforce interpersonnel diversity way back in 2012. But I couldn't say, look, we got to do interpersonnel diversity without you even seeing the person. So now if I can get people to be diversity intelligent about all of their decisions, then if you got Black people on a job that you truly see doing the same job as somebody else of color or another white person or whomever in the workplace, you can truly value that person because now you see them. You can see what their location value is to your organization. You can see what their use value is. But until you can truly see them as a contributing, valued at party in your organization, regardless of the technology or anything else, you will not get the optimization of their productivity and their skills for you. Because
Dr. Hughes, will the tool that you develop be available to the general public for use, or is that institutional application? Or
oh, it's open. It's going to be open to the general public. It's
okay.
Once I get the licensing agreement from the university, it's open for
This time I want to recognize our Q&A sponsors, one being the Black Human Resources Professional Network, a grassroots professional development and networking organization that actually connected me to 4 of the panelists that we have right here in Little Rock, Arkansas. Daydream Graphics is another sponsor for our Q&A section, and I'll recognize the others as we go along. Now we're going to allow any of our panelists to answer these questions, but we're going to start with one. There's one for you, Dr. Hughes. This is from Antoine Phillips. Dr. Hughes brings up an interesting point regarding businesses making personnel decisions going forward. How do we make sure that diversity is not sacrificed when business make personnel decisions about who to keep, who to promote? In other words, should we be concerned about quote unquote diversity losing its prevalence if we cannot see the diversity because we are working remotely? That's directed at you, Dr. Hughes, but we'll open it to anyone that has any feelings about that.
What the question is going to the ideal of what you want to see in an organization. You want to see people not looking at diversity at all. But since we are not there, you have to acknowledge each individual and what their contribution is to your organization. It goes to Kristin's point about the business case for diversity. If that person is not providing any contributions, it's going to be an ethical and legal issue for that organization. One of the, that's another book I wrote. I got 13, so I don't want to go down all of them. But from it, what I'm looking at is how diversity, ethics, and diversity intelligence can be combined inside an organization. That's one of the most recent papers that I'm working on and that I presented at a conference last year on how do we use our human resource channels of communication, which are our training and development systems, our leadership development training programs, and all of those systems to truly see the value of each individual person. So if you remotely away from the organization, you still have to go through the training systems that you have. You can invite people into the leadership development programs, because most time they leave all the Black people out, or they have a quota of 1 or 2. And once they get those 1 or 2, everybody else is left out. So from that perspective, that's how you would have to do it. That's the ideal. But until someone can integrate diversity alongside cultural intelligence, emotional intelligence, and intellectual intelligence, which is what businesses already are using to determine who they're promoting and who they're bringing forward, you can't use it, technology as an excuse.
Okay.
Leave them out.
Ivan, may I chime in just for a quick second?
Absolutely.
So when we talk about diversity losing its prevalence if we can't see it, now, honestly, in corporate America, what we can see, that's just an initial part of diversity. But a lot of the diversity is stuff that we really can't see. There are a lot of people with disabilities. We don't know that they have those disabilities. There are a lot of people with different experiences. A lot of people, there's diversity of thought or whatever. And so we have to take all of that into account whenever we're talking about diversity. So the fact that the people are going to be working from home, we still have these other aspects of diversity to take into account. Even though we can't see those workers, there's still that diversity of thought, the diversity of experience, and the different things that people bring to the table when you hire them. And I'm sure Kristin has more to add to that.
And I just put something in the chat, and I promise to be quick. But just remember that diversity has 3 dimensions, right? So you talk about organizational diversity. Where does someone fall inside the organization? You have the internal aspects of diversity, like our gender, our age, our race, sexual orientation. And then you have the external piece, which kind of goes back to our income, our parental status, right? Does someone have resources at home? What is their socioeconomic background? All of those things. And so when we talk about diversity, it's not a person, it's differences. And it's how your company defines and how they measure diversity.
Thank you, Kristin. I want to highlight our last 2 Q&A sponsors. Well Brewed Coffee Company, it's a Black-owned business where a mobile coffee experience meets consciousness, collective impact, and community investment. You can follow them on IG at Well Brewed Coffee Co., as well as Facebook, Well Brewed Coffee Co. And finally, Sevenfold Coaching. You can visit sevenfoldcoaching.com. If you have goals to get out of the rat race and live a prosperous life, but unsure of how to do it, Felicia Miller Johnson is the transformation life coach that can help you. Back to some of our questions. For the panelists, describe some of the barriers Black professionals experience on the journey from entry level to the C-suite. I know that's really been the sentiment of most of the discussion today, but are there some other experiences that you could share with the audience?
I have an experience to share that happened pretty recently. And so outside of people trying to guess what generation I belong to, I had a recruiter on LinkedIn who inboxed me about a chief diversity officer position within their organization. And when I read the job description, this person was reporting to the senior vice president of talent management, who then reported to the chief people officer, who then reported to the CEO and president. And really what a barrier looks like is just even within our own job descriptions is how many steps away is someone from the C-suite? Are we creating those barriers there? And really what I picked up from that job description is that that company does not prioritize diversity because, again, to Dr. Hughes's point, diversity has to be embedded into every single aspect of the organization. So creating those extra steps or creating positions out of nowhere, like an associate role to help someone or to help someone get to the next level. Even going back to the point about performance reviews and our internal hiring processes and promotions, how fair really is that process? Is it everyone's doing the same thing for every person? Or do we pick and choose, and do we have favorites? So thinking about those particular things in the process is how we, those are some barriers that really exist, and people having that affinity bias, or having, valuing likability over competency. So it's an individual choice that people who are in the hiring process make to be biased. And then we have to go back again and look at the processes that exist, or like Jason said, that don't exist, right? That continue on those biases and those barriers in the workplace. And we just have to call it out, right? And so many people are fearful of committing career suicide, but if you have to be fearful of retaliation for doing the right thing and for making everything equitable, then that's a problem in question. Do you really want to work there?
Thank you, Kristin. Anybody else want to chime in? If not, we're going to move on to our next question.
Just for a second.
Go ahead, Jason.
In regards to being, a lot of times in organizations, it's inclusive and exclusive. And we have to get, most often than not, about 1 in 5 or 19% of Black professionals truly feel that someone in their race or ethnicity would never achieve a top position at their present company. And we cannot have those kind of numbers when we're, a big demographic of the workforce and we're driving the business. So we have to change that aspect of what the company represents truly. And as Dr. Claretha said earlier, it's one thing of saying that, we're looking at you from what we see as from the outer exterior, but what can you bring to the actual organization? And a lot of times I tell employees, we hire because we can't teach people ethics and morals and how to be good stewards of time and those things. That's something that you can't teach. It's either you have it or you don't have it. And sometimes companies have to get past that. And
huge blocker for progress is the biggest barrier I've seen in my 30-year career is that there are often two systems, the structural systems inside organizations where you may come in at the same level. And I've had 3 people tell me this in the last week. You come in at the same level with the same degree, and you're not given the projects that will give you the visibility to progress inside the organization as a Black person that another person may get it. It may not just be another white person. If you're in an Indian organization, you may not get it. Different depending on who's the owner of the organization, how it's structured. Those type of systems where you attract differently is a huge barrier. And oftentimes people don't see it when they first go in. It's hard to discern until you see repeated people passing you by and they went through the same exact track. And I've had 3 Black females just in the last week tell me that. So I just wanted to put that out there for people who may be business owners or leaders to look at how your structures are set up and who you're tracking in one career path versus someone else.
Absolutely, absolutely. To that end, what are some ways to cultivate valuable mentorships to help advance to the C-suite? Brittany Reese says, I have found as I get older, people seem somewhat threatened by someone who is striving to excel in a similar or same industry. Some welcome college students, but once you become a certain age, it seems off-putting to some. May any of you provide some tips on this?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So the thing with mentorship, whatever your profession is, find out if there's a professional association in your area for that profession. Get involved. If they have committees, join a committee. Get to know who some of the people are in your area, in your profession. And as you get to know those people, you will find somebody that you will be comfortable with talking to about mentorship. And another thing where you might not realize this, but sometimes you can mentor someone, and as you are mentoring them, you're learning some of the things that you felt like you wanted to learn from somebody else. So mentorship is a two-way street. And the more you're getting exposed to other people in the profession, the more you're allowing yourself and willing to be engaged and involved in your profession, the better those opportunities for mentorship will be. And you will find no matter what your age, people will take a liking to you and they'll want to help you to advance in your career.
Thank you, Broderick. Moving on to the next question, and now, anybody want to jump in on that one after I ask this question, but want to get it out. In this era of the American awakening, I and other minorities in my organization now have the ear of management to try to improve acquiring, developing, promoting, and retaining Black talent. Can the panelists touch on some specific and measurable asks and tactics that we can request of management?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to really take this because there's two folds to this, right? So I call this the call to action, so to speak, and what that roadmap looks like. The first thing that corporations and companies can do is to, one, avoid performative allyship in this moment specifically. So again, getting away from placing that Black square on your social media pages, because you should be asking, what does the experience of your Black employees in your company reflect? But the second thing is to make sure that you understand the commitment level, right, from your executive team. What is their true commitment to embed diversity within the organization? I would say to look at hiring a diversity professional that is a leader that is going to be in the C-suite, because that person is going to know exactly what the additional roadmap steps will look like. That means conducting a climate and a culture analysis, right, to see where you are and to get the data. And when I say to get the data and to review it, I'm talking about looking at the overall workforce representation of your company and to see exactly by gender, by race, by function, by disability, by veteran status, exactly where everyone is falling into the organization by different departments and again, by levels within that group. I would also say to, start by creating a 3 to 5 year strategic plan with realistic goals. Don't expect to undo years and years of what hasn't been done in the next 3 months. Give yourself a break and spread the goals out and create benchmarks so that you can actually see where you're progressing to, and if you know that you've made it to a certain point that you need to be at. Provide training. Dr. Hughes talked about this quite a bit previously. So what type of training do you have in place? I'm not a big fan of required training, so to speak, but there are some trainings that need to be had. And I mean, that goes beyond talking about unconscious bias. There needs to be training about, hiring and valuing diversity. There needs to be some serious input and information shared about this. And maybe that means that your learning department is not capable of pushing that out. There are plenty of external vendors and external companies that you can bring in to do the heavy lifting for you, right? And I think maybe the last couple of things I would say is to, update and look at your internal policies and your hiring policies that promote anti-racism and discrimination, because they're there. They are there. Provide resources, support your people, fund your ERGs, your BRGs, your communities of interest, fund those with corporate dollars. And if you don't hear anything else, be intentional. It's all about what you intend to do.
Thank you so much, Kristin. We're at the top of the hour. I want to give one of the panelists, we want to say one final comment, but we're going to have to wrap it up here. But any last comments from any other panelists?
I just got one comment on that. Kristin focuses on the hiring. My big focus is on retention, because you can hire as many people as you want, but if you can't keep them, it's a wasted effort. And we saw that in every industry. And so if I'm going to ask for a change right now, I would ask for something that's going to benefit the whole, not one or two individuals. And I don't like quota systems, because once they reach a number, they won't let anybody else in. Open up the entire organization and create policies that you can measure that benefit the whole group, versus, oh, we'll let one or two Blacks in the leadership program. No, you let everybody who's qualified in, so change policy, change systems. Just one little activity is not going to do it. When you're asking for the whole basket, because everybody else is getting the whole basket already. Black people have been left out of the basket long enough. Ask for changes. I don't believe in the anti-racist and all of that training, because I feel like you already know how to treat me. Treat me the same way you treat your best buddy on the job, and we'll be being treated fairly. And so open up the system and change it as a whole so it'll be inclusive for Black people. And remember that when you talk about women, make sure you mention Black women too. Because when they say women, it's often not Black women. You can't know all of the isms that go along, but when you set up the system, set it up and be intentional, like Kristin said, and say, do we have Black people? Did we substitute it for somebody else? Did we substitute them for an international person? Did we substitute them for an LGBTQ person? Did we substitute them for a veteran or whatever? Because when you put it all together in the pot, we always get mixed in with terms like BIPOC, POC, all of these different terms. You either go with Black, African American, or whatever, but make sure you include us.
And intersectionality does exist there. So, to her point, intersectionality does exist. What you can do as an individual, don't stay silent. Make sure that you are becoming self-aware and you're educating yourself. It is not the people's job or Black people's job to educate other professionals about this. There are resources out there. Go out there, learn it, check your bias, hold your leaders accountable, ask how and why, and challenge the status quo.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jason. I hate to cut y'all. I'm gonna let you go ahead, man. But this is absolute final comment. Go ahead, Jason.
Just making sure that everybody interject themselves into the change. The change will not happen if you do not, ask for the change. A lot of times executives don't want to have those difficult conversations, and difficult conversations are not bad. But in order to get to the other side of change, you have to have the conversation. So as you're coming up and you're in whatever position you may be in, have those conversations with somebody, because that's what's going to start the change for your organization. If you don't, it's not going to happen. Thanks a lot for letting me say that, Ivan. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So we hope that you continue to have these conversations at your organizations, with your colleagues, with those that may or may not look like you. These conversations are not excessive, but they're absolutely necessary. The ultimate goal from a diversity standpoint is true equity at every level. which will include recognizing the value Black professionals contribute to the creativity and the innovation that sustains the workplace. In the meantime, we have the conversations that lead to solutions. Although we do not celebrate too early, we will celebrate milestones along the way. And to conclude, I'll paraphrase the late, great Congressman John Lewis. We are one people, we are one race, we all live in the same house. Thanks everybody for joining today.